What makes a warrior? Is it discipline, training, adherence to a doctrine honed over generations of conflict, or is it something else entirely? Something wilder, more primal, born not in a classroom or a briefing room, but in the muddy fields of a farm or the violent crucible of a boxing ring. October 8th, 1943, 6,000 feet over the flat, waterlogged landscape of the Netherlands. The air is a maelstrom of screaming engines, chattering machine guns, and the acrid smell of cordite and burning oil. Inside the cramped cockpit of a Republic P-47 Thunderbolt, Flight Officer Ralph Hofer is fighting for his life. Or, more accurately, he should be. This is his first combat mission, his first time seeing the enemy. 20 minutes ago, he was a farm boy from Salem, Missouri, who had never fired his guns in anger. Now, through the smeared plexiglass of his windscreen, he watches a predatory Messerschmitt Bf 109, its yellow nose a splash of deadly color against the gray sky, tear into a fellow American fighter with murderous precision. The rules, drilled into his head for months, are screaming at him. Rule 1. Never, ever break formation. Your life depends on your wingman, and his depends on you. Rule 2. Protect your leader at all costs. His survival is paramount to the integrity of the flight. Rule 3. Do not pursue a single enemy alone. It's a sucker's game, a trap that has claimed the lives of countless eager, foolish pilots. Every instinct a trained pilot is meant to have for self-preservation, for tactical cohesion, for the cold mathematics of survival demands he stay put. But something in Ralph Hofer, something forged in the wheat fields of Missouri and hardened in the smoky boxing gyms of Chicago, rejects those calculations entirely. He doesn't see formations or tactics. He sees a predator and its prey. He sees a fight. And Ralph Hofer has never, ever run from a fight. In a single, fluid motion that is an act of pure, unforgivable insubordination, he breaks hard left. The massive, 5-ton Thunderbolt groans under the strain as he shoves the control stick, rolling away from the protective cover of his flight. He is alone, a rookie lost over enemy territory, chasing one of the most lethal fighters in the world. He is breaking every rule in the book, and in doing so, he is about to write his own. To understand the sheer insanity of that moment, you have to understand the sky over Europe in late 1943. It was a slaughterhouse. The American 8th Air Force was committed to a radical, unproven, and increasingly costly strategy: high-altitude, daylight, precision bombing. Concocted by a group of air power zealots known as the Bomber Mafia, was that tight formations of heavily armed B-17 flying fortresses and B-24 Liberators could fight their way to targets deep inside. Germany, in broad daylight, absorbed their losses and dropped their bombs with pinpoint accuracy, shattering the Third Reich's industrial heart. It was a beautiful theory, and it was catastrophically wrong. The German Luftwaffe met this aerial armada with a ferocity that stunned American commanders. They were fighting over their own homes, guided by a sophisticated network of ground controllers who vectored them onto the lumbering bomber streams with lethal efficiency. Their pilots, many of them veterans of the Spanish Civil War, the Battle of Britain, and the brutal Eastern Front, were masters of their craft. Their weapons were perfectly suited for the task. The Focke-Wulf 4W190, a radial engine beast, was a stable, heavily armed gun platform that could dive on the bomber formations at blistering speeds. The Messerschmitt Bf 109, a nimble and deadly adversary, could slice through the formations, picking off stragglers and engaging the American escorts. The bomber's defensive, the 50 caliber machine guns, so vaunted in theory, proved inadequate. The Luftwaffe pilots developed terrifying tactics to overcome them. They would fly in long lines, line abreast, pouring cannon and machine gun fire into the formations in what they called a company front attack. They learned to attack from 12 o'clock high head-on at a closing speed of over 500 miles per hour, giving the American gunners a fleeting, impossible target to hit. The bombers fell from the sky in sickening numbers. On the infamous Schweinfurt-Regensburg mission in August 1943, 60 bombers were lost. On the second raid on Schweinfurt in October, Black Thursday, another 60 were shot from the sky, with hundreds more damaged and scores of airmen killed or captured. The American escort fighters, the P-47 Thunderbolts, were tough and heavily armed, but they had a critical flaw. They were thirsty. Their operational range was severely limited. They could escort the bombers part of the way to the target, engage in furious, fuel-guzzling dogfights, and then be forced to turn back, leaving the bombers to fend for themselves for hundreds of miles over the most heavily defended airspace in the world. For the bomber crews, the moment the little friends turned for home was the moment raw terror set in. They called the route Bomb Alley, a corridor of flak and fighters where survival felt like a coin toss. The psychological toll was immense. Men who were boys just months earlier were forced to watch their friends incinerated in neighboring planes, to listen to the screams of the wounded over the intercom, to fly for hours in freezing, unpressurized cabins, knowing that a single cannon shell could spell their doom. The 8th Air Force was bleeding to death. The daylight bombing campaign, the cornerstone of Allied air strategy, was on the verge of collapse. This was the world Ralph Hofer flew into, a world of impossible odds, where the life expectancy of a pilot was measured in weeks, and the sky was a canvas of constant, unrelenting fear. The Americans didn't just need more pilots or more planes. They needed a new kind of fighter pilot, someone who could break the stalemate, someone who didn't just escort, but hunted, someone aggressive, fearless, and utterly contemptuous of the odds. They needed a rule breaker because the rules were getting them killed. They had no idea they were about to get one in the form of a Missouri farm boy who had joined the Air Force on a whim. The man who would become one of the most undisciplined and lethal fighter pilots in the 8th Air Force was born into a world without wings. Ralph "Kid" Hofer entered the world on the 22nd of June 1921 on a farm near Salem, Missouri. In the rural America of the 1922, the future was measured in crop yields and rainfall, not airspeed and altitude. The sky was for weather, not for war. His father passed away when he was just 4, and after his mother remarried, he took his stepfather's surname, Hofer, a name that would one day be spoken with a mixture of awe and exasperation in briefing rooms across England. His upbringing was defined by the harsh realities of the Great Depression. There was no electricity in his home, no indoor plumbing, and certainly no suggestion that he was destined for anything but a life of hard labor. Yet, this upbringing forged the core of his being. He learned to fix machinery, to work the land, and to endure. He developed a physical toughness and a resilience that would later serve him well. His escape from the grinding poverty of rural life came through athletics. He was a natural. In 1940, he won a trophy in the prestigious Golden Gloves boxing tournament as a light heavyweight. He played semi-pro football in Chicago, a city his family had relocated to. These weren't just games, they were his real education. In the ring and on the field, he learned to think on his feet, to react instinctively, to absorb punishment and keep coming forward. The aggression that would later terrify Luftwaffe pilots was honed not in a cockpit simulator, but against opponents at Trafton's gym in Chicago. He even boxed professionally for a short time, fighting under his birth name, Halbrook, and sparring with the legendary light heavyweight champion, Billy Conn. Formal education held little interest for him. He enrolled briefly in junior college, dabbling in commercial art, but the structured environment suffocated his restless spirit. By 1941, he was adrift, taking a civilian job at Fort Leonard Wood in Missouri. His vague plans centered on heading to California to become a prize fighter. Aviation, combat, and destiny were not even on his radar. The moment that changed everything was a complete accident, a bizarre twist of fate. In the fall of 1941, before America had entered the war, Hofer was in Detroit. He'd contracted to deliver a brand new 1942 Hudson automobile from the factory to a buyer on the West Coast in exchange for travel expenses. While waiting for the car to be ready, he took a day trip across the river to Windsor, Ontario, in Canada. An immigration official, seeing a young, fit American, made an assumption and pointed him toward a Royal Canadian Air Force recruiting office. Hofer had never been inside an airplane. He had no technical education, no understanding of navigation or ballistics. But the same impulsiveness that defined his boxing style took over. Within hours of crossing the border, on the 19th of July, 1941, he had enlisted as an aviation cadet in the RCAF. The Hudson, California, and the boxing ring were all forgotten. It was a decision that should have been a disaster. Aviation training was a world of mathematics, procedure, and precision. Hofer possessed none of these, yet somehow he managed to get through. He learned to fly, passed his courses through sheer grit, and by October 1942, Sergeant Pilot Hofer was shipped to Britain. Still, the war remained at a distance. Frustrated, he languished in training units while the real fighting raged. His opportunity came in June 1943, when the U.S. Army Air Forces, desperate for trained pilots, began accepting transfers. Hofer jumped at the chance. He was now a flight officer in the USAAF, a unique rank for non-commissioned pilots, and on a direct path to a combat unit. He was assigned to the 334th Fighter Squadron of the 4th Fighter Group, stationed at RAF Debden. He couldn't have landed in a more perfect place. The 4th was no ordinary unit. It had been formed from the 3 original RAF Eagle Squadrons groups of American volunteers who had illegally crossed into Canada to fight for Britain before Pearl Harbor. The Eagles brought with them a culture of fierce independence, a contempt for peacetime military discipline, and an aggressive, brawling spirit. They were the most successful, most individualistic, and most feared fighter group in the 8th Air Force. Into this den of lions walked Ralph Hofer, a lion of a different breed entirely. To be a rule breaker, you first need rules to break. In the air war over Europe, the rules were dictated by physics, engineering, and brutal combat experience. The machine Ralph Hofer first took into battle was the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt, and it was a brute. Pilots nicknamed it the Jug because it was shaped like a milk jug, but also as shorthand for juggernaut. Empty, it weighed over 5 tons. Its heart was a massive 18-cylinder Pratt & Whitney R 2,800 double Wasp radial engine, a 2,000 horsepower monster that gave the plane both its greatest strengths and its most glaring weaknesses. The Jug was, above all, tough. Its sheer bulk could absorb an incredible amount of punishment and keep flying. Its 8 .50 caliber machine guns, 4 in each wing, could unleash a devastating hailstorm of lead, shredding any German fighter that strayed into its sights. And its greatest asset was its performance in a dive. With its immense weight and powerful engine, the P-47 could plummet out of the sky at speeds approaching the sound barrier. A German pilot who tried to dive away from a Thunderbolt was a dead man. But the Jug was not a nimble dogfighter. It was sluggish in a climb and couldn't turn with the more agile BF 109 seconds and 190 seconds. Standard doctrine, therefore, was rigid. P-47 pilots were taught to use energy tactics. They were to maintain their altitude and speed at all costs, making diving, slashing attacks, and then using their momentum to climb back up to safety. They were to fight as a team, using a formation called the Finger Four, where 4 planes flew in a staggered arrangement, allowing them to cover each other's blind spots. The core principle was mutual support. A lone wolf was a dead wolf. The tactics were designed to maximize the P-47's strengths and minimize its weaknesses. Then, in early 1944, the game changed. The 4th Fighter Group transitioned to the North American P-51 Mustang. If the P-47 was a heavyweight brawler, the P-51 was a graceful, long-limbed boxer. The genius of the Mustang was its marriage of a superb American airframe with the legendary British Rolls-Royce Merlin engine. This combination, along with its revolutionary laminar flow wing design, gave the P-51 unprecedented speed, agility, and most importantly, range. With external drop tanks, the Mustang could fly all the way to Berlin and back. The era of the unprotected bomber was over. For a pilot like Hofer, the Mustang was the perfect instrument. It had the speed and firepower he craved, but also the agility to get him out of the trouble his reckless tactics inevitably created. It allowed his individualistic style to flourish. He could now roam far and wide over the Reich, a lone hunter seeking his prey. The strategy he employed was simple. There was no strategy. He saw a target, and he attacked it. He ignored the finger four, he ignored his wingman, he ignored the odds. His favorite tactic was the head-on pass, a terrifying game of aerial chicken that most pilots avoided at all costs. But for Hofer, the former boxer, it was instinctive. Get in close, hit hard, and don't flinch. He flew his $500,000 fighter plane with the same cheerful disregard for its limitations as he had for his own body in the ring. He was a practitioner of chaos, and in the P-51 Mustang, he had found his perfect weapon. March 18th, 1944. The mission is a deep penetration escort for bombers attacking Munich. Hofer, flying a new P-51 Mustang, is assigned the most junior position in his flight. Number 4. Wingman to the wingman. His job is to be invisible, to watch the tails of the other 3 planes, and to shut up. Over Bavaria, he spots a lone Bf-109 far below. The rules say he reports it to his flight leader. The rules say he stays in formation. Hofer says nothing. Without a word over the radio, he peels off and dives. The attack is over in seconds. The Messerschmitt, caught completely by surprise, erupts in a ball of flame. Hofer pulls up, exhilarated, and scans the sky. His flight is gone, a distant speck on the horizon. Unaware he's even missing. He is alone, deep inside Germany. As he climbs to rejoin them, he spots another 109. He gives chase, the German pilot. Seeing the shark-like profile of the Mustang closing in, doesn't even try to fight. He simply bails out. 2 kills. Hofer's radio is malfunctioning. He's separated from his unit, and he's low on fuel. The sensible, sane thing to do is to turn for home. Instead, he goes hunting. He circles a German airfield, looking for more targets. He chases a 3rd enemy fighter into the clouds and loses it. Frustrated, he decides to head for Munich, the original target, hoping to find action. Hofer shoves the throttle to the firewall and climbs to engage. That's when his Mustang tries to kill him. The propeller pitch control fails. The blades lose their bite on the air, windmilling uselessly. The engine screams in protest, threatening to tear itself from its mounts. The aircraft shudders violently, losing speed and altitude. For the first time, survival enters Hofer's mind. The Swiss border is nearby. Internment in neutral Switzerland means the war is over. But it means living. He puts the crippled plane into a glide and heads south. Over the Alps, he prepares to bail out, jettisoning his canopy. The wind screams through the open cockpit. And then, as inexplicably as it failed, the propeller control corrects itself. The blades bite. The engine roars back to life. He is flying a perfectly good, albeit topless, P-51. He does a quick fuel calculation. It's razor thin, but he might just make it back to England. He turns the nose of his canopyless fighter west and flies for hours across German-occupied France, the freezing wind tearing at him. He crosses the Channel, the white cliffs of Dover a welcome sight. He lands at an emergency strip in Kent with exactly 6 gallons of fuel left in his tanks, less than 10 minutes of flight time. On a single, chaotic, insubordinate mission, he has destroyed 2 enemy aircraft, nearly been interned, and flown home in a convertible. He has also just become a flying ace. The mission over Munich made Hofer an ace, but it was in the late spring of 1944 that he transformed from a reckless pilot into a legend. For most fighter pilots, a combat tour was a long, grinding affair, punctuated by moments of terror. A victory was something to be savored, a rare achievement that might not be repeated for weeks or months. For Hofer, the last 10 days of May were a period of sustained, almost supernatural violence that defied comprehension. He entered a state of pure fury. The sky over the Reich became his personal hunting ground. He claimed 14 German aircraft destroyed in that 10-day period, a mix of aerial victories and devastating low-level strafing attacks. 14 kills in 10 days. It was a rate that approached the scores of some aces over their entire careers. His commanders, caught between fury at his methods and awe at his results, promoted him twice in that period, from flight officer to second lieutenant, and then to first lieutenant. The promotions did nothing to change his behavior. His most destructive tactic was also his most dangerous. Strafing. Attacking a heavily defended German airfield was widely considered a suicide mission. The fields were ringed with batteries of 20mm and 37mm flak cannons, manned by experienced crews who could throw up a wall of lethal, exploding steel. American fighters were routinely shredded and shot down during these low-level attacks, but Hofer seemed immune. He would press his attacks at treetop level, his 8 machine guns blazing, flying directly into the torrent of anti-aircraft fire. On May 29th, he roared over a German field and destroyed 5 Heinkel He 177 heavy bombers on the ground. He flew so low, so fast, that the German gunners couldn't track him. He would pull up through flak bursts that tore other planes apart, his Mustang miraculously untouched. The farm boy was becoming a phantom, a one-man wrecking crew who seemed to be everywhere at once, sowing chaos and destruction wherever he went. Who was this man? On the ground, Ralph Hofer was as unruly as he was in the air. He violated every grooming standard, his brown hair markedly longer than regulations allowed. He often wore a bright blue football jersey, number 78, under his flight jacket, and a distinctive gold snake ring on his left hand. He was frequently seen around RAF Debden with his adopted Alsatian dog, Duke, and according to witnesses, he would sometimes take the dog on local flights, crouching down to create the illusion that Duke was at the controls as he flew past other pilots. He treated his parachute as optional, often leaving it behind to make more room in the cockpit. His disregard for authority was legendary. Picked up by military police in London for not wearing his rank insignia, they discovered he also wasn't carrying any identification. His uniform blouse was tailored in the zoot suit fashion, a style associated more with jazz clubs than military professionalism. He was a walking, breathing discipline problem, and yet there was an undeniable charisma to him, a cheerful, almost boyish charm that made it hard to stay angry with him for long. His relationship with his commanding officer, Colonel Don Blakesley, was a study in contrasts. Blakesley, himself a legendary ace who would fly nearly 500 missions without being shot down, was a proponent of aggression, but he despised sloppiness. Hofer was the embodiment of both. Blakesley grounded Hofer, denied him access to the officers' club, and threatened him constantly. Yet he always put him back on the flight roster. He couldn't afford not to. The farm boy delivered results no one else could. For the men who flew with him, Hofer was a paradox. He was a phantom wingman. You might start a mission with him on your wing, but you could never be sure he'd be there when the shooting started. His tendency to break formation and disappear in pursuit of a target left his flight leader exposed and his squadron mates vulnerable. Pilots died because of the gaps he left in the formation. Yet, there was an undeniable respect for his courage and his incredible skill. He was a force of nature, and his squadron mates could only watch in a mixture of terror and awe. His radio transmissions became the stuff of legend. While other pilots maintained strict radio silence or used clipped professional call signs, Hofer would chatter away. During one tense mission, flying over the breathtaking but hostile landscape of the Alps, while every other pilot was scanning for enemy fighters, Hofer keyed his microphone and broadcast to the entire group, "Gee, ain't the Alps pretty?" It was pure Hofer, completely detached from the danger, living entirely in his own spectacular, violent moment. He wasn't just a soldier, he was an artist of chaos, and the sky was his canvas. July 2nd, 1944. The 4th Fighter Group is flying escort for bombers hitting oil refineries near Budapest, Hungary. The sky erupts into a massive, swirling dogfight with a large formation of Bf 109 seconds. Captain George Stanford, leading his flight, suddenly has his mission go sour. His external drop tanks refuse to release, and then his engine throws a piston rod, streaming smoke and oil. He's forced to break away, losing altitude, with no hope of making it back to the Allied base in Italy. He expertly belly lands his P-51 inches, a Hungarian wheat field, and is quickly taken prisoner as he stands near his wrecked aircraft. A lone Mustang buzzes him at treetop level. It's his wingman, Ralph Hofer, who had broken formation to follow his leader down, to check if he was okay. It was a gesture of loyalty, a rare glimpse of the man behind the Maverick, and it was a fatal mistake. As Stanford watches, his heart sinks. Positioned perfectly behind Hofer, unseen, is a Bf 109. The German fighter opens fire, and the two planes disappear over the horizon. Back in Italy, when the scattered remnants of the 4th Fighter Group landed, 6 Mustangs were missing. Among them was Ralph Hofer. For weeks, his fate was unknown. Eventually, word came through the Red Cross. Hofer's body had been found in the wreckage of his plane near Mostar, in what was then Yugoslavia, hundreds of miles south of the dogfight. The mystery of his final moments would last for over 50 years. Stanford's eyewitness account confirmed he was attacked, but it didn't explain how he ended up so far off course. The full story was painstakingly pieced together by historians. It seems Hofer, possibly damaged in the initial attack by the Hungarian pilot, did not turn for home. In true Hofer fashion, he likely saw the German-operated airfield at Mostar, and even in a crippled plane, decided to attack it. It was his last act of defiance. Records from the German flak unit stationed there confirmed that a lone P-51 was shot down at low level while attacking the airfield on July 2nd. The crash killed Hofer and 2 members of the German gun crew. The rule-breaker's luck had finally run out. He was 23 years old. The news of his death hit the 4th Fighter Group hard. There was a complex sense of grief mixed with a strange sort of relief. The constant chaos, the need to explain his absences to furious commanders, was over, but a light had gone out of the squadron. The wild, unpredictable, brilliant farm boy was gone. In 9 months of combat, he had flown 74 missions and destroyed 30 German aircraft, 15 inches the air, 15 on the ground. He had become a symbol of the untamable American fighting spirit. A pilot whose very existence demoralized the enemy. The Germans could plan for tactics and formations, but they could never plan for a man like Ralph Hofer. In the final accounting of war, what is the measure of a man like Ralph Hofer? Was he a hero or a liability? Did he succeed because he broke every rule? Or was he just an incredibly gifted pilot whose luck held out for 9 spectacular months, despite tactics that should have killed him in his first week? The truth is, he was all of these things. Compared to the methodical, disciplined aces of the 8th Air Force, like Bud Mahurin or the top scorer George Preddy, Hofer was an anomaly. They were tacticians who blended aggression with precision. They led flights, they protected their wingmen, they managed risk, they were soldiers. Hofer was something else. He was a pure fighter, an individual warrior operating within a vast military machine that never quite knew what to do with him. His success came at a cost that doesn't appear on his victory tally. Formations were weakened when he vanished. Wingmen were left exposed. His commanders spent countless hours managing the administrative chaos he created. If every pilot in the 8th Air Force had flown like Hofer, the Allied air campaign would have collapsed into anarchy. The disciplined, by-the-book pilots who flew their formations, covered their leaders, and brought the bombers home were the bedrock of victory. But warfare is not just a science of systems and doctrines. It is a profoundly human endeavor that, at its core, rewards aggression, initiative, and the willingness to seize a fleeting opportunity. Hofer existed at the extreme edge of that reality. He was effective precisely because he was the exception. German pilots, trained in rigid, coordinated tactics, were baffled and terrified by this lone Mustang that would appear out of nowhere and press an attack with suicidal ferocity. His story is a paradox. He was not a good soldier, but he was a brilliant fighter. In the desperate calculus of total war, that distinction mattered more than any regulation he violated. The Fourth Fighter Group, in its own unruly wisdom, understood this. They tolerated his indiscipline because they desperately needed his results. They couldn't tame him. They couldn't replicate him. They could only unleash him and watch in amazement as the farm boy from Missouri, the kid who wore a football jersey and flew with his dog, carved his name into the violent skies of the Third Reich. He was a flawed, chaotic, and ultimately tragic figure, a testament to the fact that sometimes, in the crucible of war, the greatest warriors are not the ones who follow the plan, but the ones who rip it up and create their own.